Hello and welcome, Equestria Daily listeners. My name is Cereal Velocity. Today I have with me Phoebe. Say hi.
Hello.
And we also have in the room a man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Most frequently cited for his role in the Star Trek series Next Generation, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine, he has nevertheless appeared on many other shows, such as the original Battlestar Galactica, Breaking Bad, and recently Torchwood. You may know him as Discord. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Lancie. How are you today, John?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm fantastic. We have some questions for you. We've wrangled you in here, so now we're going to grill you.
Okay.
So let's just dive right in, not waste any time. So this whole pony thing came as quite a surprise, as I understand. So now that you've had the chance to know both of your major fan bases a little more, one of those being the Star Trek fandom, how does interacting with the Bronies compare with that?
Well, they are decidedly a younger fan base, spanning less years. You know, you don't have young kid, parent, grandparent, which is what I have right now with Star Trek. So it's much more of a early fan base, and but in terms of their interest and their enthusiasm and their dedication to what it is that the show has to say, it's very much the same.
So the level of commitment, the level of excitement is roughly equivalent, you'd say?
I would say so, yes. And you know what? It's sort of new. It isn't sort of new. It is new. It's new, particularly for me, but I think it's new in terms of just the fans themselves. I mean, the show itself. The show is new. The whole notion of it is new. So it's pretty. You know, it hasn't kind of gone out into the culture in the same way that Star Trek has. You know, I don't get stopped by people who say, well, if you want to see the real thing, come to, Cape Kennedy or Annenberg Air Force Base. You know, I started out as a young kid who started with Star Trek, and now I'm the head of the launch. I'm a launch director for Annenberg or something, which is what I've had before. I'm getting fans that are really early on. I mean, and there's a part of me that feels like it's kind of a little bit like the age of Aquarius, or kind of, I'm not religious at all, so don't misunderstand me in terms of that. But in terms of it has sort of like what I imagine the first or second century Christians were like. My God, it's just, you've got to look into this. I know it's a little, this or that, but you've got to it's really interesting. And, so it has a lot of that passion behind it.
Fans can be a little evangelical sometimes, but it's interesting what inspires those sorts of things.
Yeah. I'm all for it, especially since it's about being good and about about a good doing good things and being tolerant and being understanding and being honest and all those type of things which are good. So that's why I'm particularly enthralled about being involved.
Somewhat like Roddenberry's vision of the future, if you will.
Well, Roddenberry's vision is that through science and industry, we will have a better future, which is the classic science fiction thing. And here, we have a show where I think it's taken us back to, if you do nice things for people and you behave well and you're considerate, good things will happen for the event, and then also good things will happen for you and other people. So. And that too is postulating a better future, because God knows we seem to be going through a period right now which is very much contrary to that.
I agree. All right, going back to your role of ponies, the character of Discord that you played for that two-parter, season 2, instant fan favorite, lots of fan art, lots of explosion of things. It drew a lot of comparisons to your work in the role of Q on Star Trek. Could you tell us just briefly about your work with Friendship is Magic? How'd you get involved? Do you have anything interesting to say that maybe you haven't elaborated on before?
Well, I did the show. I mean, I just simply got called by my agent asking me if I wanted to do the show. I mean, I didn't know the show at all. So I said, well, send me the material, which is what I do for everything. And I read the material and I went, oh, well, this is really good. And all of material, good material, has a rhythm, has a particular sort of vibration. And I could feel it in this. Now, it was only after hearing the story that someone said that Lauren Faust had been a Star Trek fan, had wanted a character, which would kind of reap mayhem, and thought of the character of Q because she had already seen it. But that you have to understand, I don't look. I mean, I've played many characters since Q, and I don't look upon them as being just extensions of Q. Are they extensions of myself? Yes. So when you are writing a character, in this case, when Lauren wrote this character, and it was intended to have a feeling like Q, well, then if you're going to ask Lancie to play it, then there are going to be kind of similarities there. But when I was preparing the show, I didn't think of Q at all, frankly. I thought of the character of Discord. And I dare say if I had never played Q before, nobody would have made that comparison. They would have just gone, "Oh, wow, he really sounds like he's a big problem and needs to be watched." So that's sort of what took place there.
I think it's good that you didn't directly draw on him, though obviously it didn't. There was some transparency that I think everybody caught, but mostly because it is you. Anyway, back on topic. I'm going to let Phoe handle the next two questions. We're going to start talking about the documentary itself.
Yeah. So segueing into the topic of the documentary that's just about to end its fundraiser in the next couple of days, what exactly brought up the idea of doing a documentary? Why a documentary and not, say, any number of other things that might have been done with your time and money?
Well, I was at home. A friend of mine, Mike Brokoff, who I had done some shows with in the past and who I've maintained a friendship with over the years, we did some Discovery Channel stuff a number of years ago, and we just stayed in touch. He happened to come over to the house for dinner, and I was telling him about bronies. And every time you tell the story, 25-year-old guys who are watching a show that was essentially made for 8-year-old girls, you get an immediate, and it's always the same reaction. And I look for that reaction, and then I could say, ah, ha, ha, but Mike, something else is going on here. Well, he goes, well, what? And I began to tell him. And by the time I was finished with my telling him about the show, telling him about the audience members that I had met, telling him that it was not what his first impression was, which was frankly what my first impression, which is everyone's first impression when I hear it. I said, "Isn't that interesting?" And he went, "Yeah, that is really interesting. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think the show is so popular for an age group and a gender group which is so different than who it was originally intended for?" So we went into the general discussion about that, not really knowing what the answer is, or if there is only one answer. There are many answers to this. And at the end of the conversation, that was sort of it. And then we went on to something else. It was a dinner party, so it wasn't the only thing we were talking about. A couple of days later, he called me and he said, "Why don't we do a documentary?" And I said, I feel sort of awkward about doing that. This is their thing. I have only done 2 episodes. I mean, while maybe the character is popular today, it's such a minor character in all of this, and I don't really want to be jumping in on a. I don't know. It just feels like I'm kind of crashing somebody else's party. So and it was left that way for a week or 2, and then he happened to send me a series of news programs that I thought were typically mean-spirited and dismissive, and it just happened to hit me at a time. I'm very interested in politics. I'm very interested in current events and how the world is working and what have you, and how oftentimes our country is not working well, and particularly how the news media, some news media, is more interested in creating sensationalism than they are in actually creating news. They're just gossip and junk, and it really upset me that what I had now grown to understand was a show that kind of had created a tent, an umbrella, a lagoon, an oasis for people to do good things, to involve themselves in creative things, be it music or art or what have you. Were willy-nilly just being painted in a really disparaging and dismissive sort of way. And when I saw that, it upset me. And I called Mike back and I said, "You know what? I'm glad you sent me that. And who are these people? God darn it. I mean, that they would, let's do it. Okay, let's do the documentary." But it was more of, it wasn't really because I had thought it out. It was more just as a reaction that, these guys or these people need some sort of protection from this. They need to, if nothing else, they need to be able to say who they are rather than have someone identify who they are before they get an opportunity. So he said, "Fine. Okay, great." And I said, he said, "Can I come over to your house and we could do a little thing for Kickstarter?" And I said, I don't really know what Kickstarter is. I've heard about it. But he said, "Well, if we could raise $60,000, it would give us an opportunity to go to this convention that you're going to, and we could include everything that's in the convention." And I said, "Is 60 going to really be enough? Because you understand that most of what filming is all about is in post-production. And even though you have to pay for camera crews and hotels and transportation and what have you, the real important work, important cost is at the back end, and nobody negotiates that. Film production houses know that by the time you bring it to them, they've got you." And he said, "Well, it's a little low, but even so, the way Kickstarter works, if we don't get all of it, it all disappears." And I said, "Okay, fine." And I just thought, frankly thought that was the end of it. Who knows? Somebody would, a bunch of people might give $10,000, and that would be the end of it. And I would have felt good by virtue of saying, "Yeah, let's do something for the Bronies," and then it would have fallen apart and what have you. Well, as you all well know, within 36 hours, we had $60,000, and I went, "My God!"
Yeah, there was a lot of gawking from all of our ends as well.
And at that point, I said, "We need to really take this seriously." And he said, "Are you telling me?" And so we then began literally 8 to 10 hours a day getting in touch with a lot of people, asking a lot of people. Have me finally getting in touch with Lauren, and then Tara, who has a lot of opinions about the stuff, and then but also people who wrote articles, and people who are sociologists, and people who are, and it just went further and further and further until we then looked at each other. We had a meeting, and we went, this is so much bigger than we ever expected. We have kind of fallen down the rabbit hole, and we are in Alice Wonderland here. And
who are these crazy people with all this money?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't even the money thing. It was that as the money began to, we began going, well, what does this money allow us to do? Well, it allows us to make concentric circles out. When we started getting emails from the Ukraine and tremendous responses from the military, people in the military, and then the England and Germany, Canada, and stuff like that. We kept on going. We have to include everybody. So that's when we brought Lauren in. We really sat her down, and Tara. But we really sat Lauren down and said, listen, we need to know everything you know. And she, what's wonderful about all of this is that nobody really has an answer. Everybody has all sorts of answers, but nobody really has an answer. And so that's kind of what we're in search of. And what's terrific about it is that it is a little like Star Trek, and that is that Star Trek, with the use of science fiction, created a tent, an umbrella, under which many, many people, at first it was people who were interested in the show, but then it could be people who were interested in other science fiction, not just, that could be Asimov and I don't know, and then fantasy, Tolkien, and then and then computers, and then, motion pictures and stuff like that. Well, I began to say to my compatriots, I said, we are at the beginning of a phenomenon which I am familiar with, but we're sort of at the beginning of it. And this is really an important one. And I'm talking too much now, I'm sorry, but
no, please continue.
All right, please continue. This is fascinating.
This is a really important one. And one of the things which I find to be particularly important, since I have two sons, is that it could part of this be is that we have created a culture where the only male entertainment, which is not frowned upon, is beating somebody up at a hockey rink or shooting people in video games. Is that the only thing that males are able to do? Could this be the reaction of waking up every morning and finding out that guys dressed in black and in masks pulled out little children and mothers in Syria and killed them execution-wise? I can tell you one thing: there weren't any bronies in that group who did something like that. And it just goes on and on and on in terms of what sort of culture have we created, and why is it that people are going to a show which was really intended for somebody else, and yet at the same time has elements of the show which are wonderfully good, are really good, that things that all human beings should embrace, and yet one has to sort of couch one's interest. Well, yes, I know, I watch a show with ponies in it, in sort of an embarrassed sort of way. And I go, what our society has really turned things upside down, that such elements of, they are the elements can be these good elements could be made to be one could be embarrassed to say that you embrace them. So as time was going on, I was beginning to, in the last couple of weeks, go, these people are very brave. They're brave to subject themselves to possible ridicule, immediate sort of raised eyebrows, and possible ridicule and total misunderstanding over something which is as positive as what this show represents. So in that we began going, we need to. I was just talking today to a woman who's a major force in young in the education of young children, and how, as she said, there's a malnutrition that is going on in our society for young children. I'm in touch with an award-winning Academy Award-winning documentarian today who when I finished talking to him, he said, "Oh, I think you're really onto something, which is really, really fascinating." I love the fact that the girl in Germany was telling me that certain members of the German parliament actually use what they consider the way she translated it to me was pony time, but pony time is, as I understood it, it was a combination of two words which means better together, and that they when things become too contentious, everybody looks at each other and goes, "Hey, let's just take a deep breath. Let's have a little pony time here, and relax, and then work together again." And again, we live in a society where we have two political groups who are willing to let the country go down the tubes as long as they win. And so I just thought that a lot of big significant stories attached to this, as well as small triumphs. I mean, personal triumphs. Uh, the the soldier who told us about being in a firefight in Afghanistan and singing them being really, really scared, and how they one of them began humming that song when they're in the forest in the first episode or second episode. And so I just thought, and also I've been very affected by the fact that I've had a number of emails from people who say, is this a documentary that I'll be able to show my parents? And I go, oh my God, yes, they will be really proud of you. So those are all of the things that, and I'm not being very articulate. I'm not articulating very well right now, but I'm giving you kind of a panoply of reasons why this has become more and more interesting to me.
You said you were looking for an answer with a documentary. Do you think you're going to find it?
I don't think I need to find an answer. I know that I'm going to find many answers, and I'm going to find also answers that I hadn't expected, which is part of what is the joy of doing the documentary. It's a little stressful, when there's this much responsibility, but I think there are many reasons, and that many of them are equally valid depending on who the person is. I think that one of the biggest ones has to do with community. It has to do with the internet and something that was not available to people before, which is the ability to reach out and speak to people all over the world at all sorts of multiple time zones at the same time about a particular interest and a particular need, to have that available to you. So, I mean, I think we're going to get all sorts of different reasons, and and all of them are going to be certainly interesting, and I believe all of them are going to be laudable.
So then you would say that the goal of the documentary is to tell stories and allow people to draw their own conclusions? Would that be accurate?
I mean, we're not going in there to identify. We're going in there to explore.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing that could possibly happen is that after, one watches for whatever, 80 minutes or 90 minutes, it turns off and it engenders more conversation with the people that you're with. Now, for the real aficionados, they're going to probably end up saying, "Oh, well, my God, I can't believe that he didn't include so and so and so and so," or "We really needed to go further down that trail or further down this trail." But for the general public, I think it's going to be an awakening of a social phenomena that is happening based on perhaps certain needs that have been woefully not dealt with for too many years in our culture. And that I know that walk away going, well, I had no idea. This is remarkable, and what a remarkable group of people that to embark upon this. So those are, in a highly generalized way, that's some of the stuff that we're going to do. I mean, when you look at a documentary, you have to understand is that most documentaries are not really, don't come into total focus until you're in production, and sometimes it isn't even until you get to editing that they come into real focus. I just watched a documentary about King of Kong. Did any of you see it?
I did not.
No, I did not catch that.
It's about the guy who was a master Kong. That it's a classic video game, and he was a master player. And then a new guy who was challenging him, and what you discover in the process, I mean, and that's pretty much it. Except what you process is that the guy who's challenging him is really a great guy. I mean, a really, really nice guy, and the guy is the challenger, has been, or rather, is the champion. The guy he so wants to hold on to his title that he's actually willing to either play kind of Machiavellian like, and ultimately not to compete. So it turns out to be what they thought was going to be a documentary about, two people who were going to, the King of Kong, and who was going to be the one, what have you. It gets into a very interesting psychological discussion, expose on what it's like to feel a need to hold on to your title, and that you're willing to do anything to hold on to your title, and it's interesting is that guy comes off very, very poorly in the documentary, and the challenger is just a really, really sweet guy who and so you just never know where these things are going to take you. And one thing which I wanted to make clear was that, as I said in the thing for the Bronycon, the Kickstarter thing, this will be respectful, it will be insightful, and it will be entertaining. And those are the three things that we are adhering to through all of it.
Jumping off of that, what you just said, actually, you've openly stated that you want this documentary to be in a positive light. Do you think that this affects the nature of the documentary in regards to a bias?
Well, to the extent I don't want to follow somebody who who so clearly is at the fringe of the community that the rest of the community would go, well, that's not really the case. I mean, as somebody who knows the Star Trek community very well, I can tell you that 99.9% of the Star Trek community is made up of very nice, serious, um, uh, understanding, interesting people. Could I pick a nutcase? Yeah, I could. And then what would I have done? I would have sort of besmeared the other 99.9%. You know what I'm saying? And so I don't want to do that just for the sake of being sort of sensational. That's not. I don't think that that's not representative, and it's frankly doing the same thing that the news program did. And I don't want to do that. That's not. I want to give everybody in this community a sense of respect for what they do, entitlement to what they do, and that the general population at large to say, look beyond the, the read, that it's not just don't look at what is it, you can't, what is it, determine a book by its cover. You go beyond this and see what a positive force this is. So I have to open that up and make sure that I include that. That's my intent. I just don't. I want people to feel good about it. I don't want people to have to go, oh my God, am I going to be made fun of? And because that's already what's going on, and I just don't want to be doing that.
I see. In regards to the documentary and how you view it as panning out, I recognize that the storyline for the documentary itself is going to come out as a result of what you see when you start actually turning on the cameras. But how successful do you think that it will be in moving people who are not familiar with the fandom beyond that initial stage of incredulity? That is to say, how well do you see this altering people's perceptions of the fandom beyond the way that the news media is currently portraying us?
Well, it's going to be, we're going to go, that's what the intent is that we are going to go beyond that.
Well, yes, but there's more, do you think that it will have a major impact, or?
Well, I would hope so, because I mean, like anything else, once you get to understand somebody or understand something, you tend to appreciate it more. You tend to embrace it more. So I think by virtue of that, one could say, a very skeptical observer could, after watching something like this, could say, well, I don't know. I mean, I would never, make a drawing. I'm just thinking at the top of my head. I would never sketch a pony. Yeah, okay, I understand that. I probably wouldn't either. How do you feel about the charity work? Oh, that's great. It's fantastic. Oh yeah. And the music? Oh, I love some of that music. Yeah, it's just great. My God, how do they do that? I mean, that's what. So I will have the documentary will have. It's not to convince everybody about everything. It's sort of to open the door and say, let's go into the house, and we'll come into the house through my eyes in a way. So you the general audience will feel somewhat safe and what have you, and you will see a fandom at work where it really works really well. I mean, remember, there are other fandoms too, and they call themselves skinheads. So there are other groups out there, and their meetings are not about nice things, and they don't do creative acts, and they don't carry on charities. They figure out ways to blow things up and to hurt people. I'm trying to say that this is a community that's actually is doing a lot of nice things and good things and things for each other and what have you, and that's what's important. That's why when people ask me, well, how do you feel about, you know, the toys or the whatever, like the cartoon itself, the film, the animated itself, I said, you know, I'm not really that interested in that. I'm interested in the community that has gathered around here and how this community seems to interact and how positive I feel that interaction is when you compare it to a world where there's so many negative things that are going on.
I think that's an excellent answer, and I think that's the best way to approach this. I think that's it. I think we've gone through all our questions. Is there anything
Well, you
else?
know what? I talked endlessly. Why don't you ask me some questions more, and I will answer them in short shrift. I'm sorry, I sort of waxed on.
That's why we're here.
Okay.
We want to hear your side of this, because everyone is extremely interested in how you're going to approach this, myself included.
Well, let me just say is that everyone has been tremendously helpful, and more to the point, our problem might, you know, what Mike keeps on trying to, you know, say to me. He said, John, we can't include everyone. You know, I'm trying to make this bigger and bigger and bigger, and obviously there will come a point where we've got to bring it down. You know, like the documentarian that I was talking to today, he said, you know, if you make it too big, if you try to follow 10 people, it'll never get off the ground. You really need to follow 3 or 4, and we have at least 10. We might follow 10, but we're only going to end up using 3 or 4, and we are set up for one convention because that's the one in which I happen to be going to. I know that there are others, and we would love to go to them, and it's very possible that we will be able to. There's even the idea of being able to go to England. If we can get past a certain amount, we will try to go to England and Germany, because it's going to be really interesting to see the differences, although I've talked to these people already. And what's really fun about it is that you are all very tight. You're all very together in your way of in your approaches. But even so, it's just fun to, you know, have somebody in a German accent say the same things. You know, I mean, those are fun things, and they have a different perspective to the extent of how it's used for them, and they don't get to see the shows in quite the same way, and their community is perhaps a little different. So, but we'll see it. We'll see how that works. There's 3 major stages to making a documentary of this sort, and first of all is where we are in right now, which is just talking about it and talking and talking and talking. More meetings tonight, meetings during last weekend, many more meetings this week, and what have you. Then there's the collection phase, where everybody goes out, the different teams go out with the notion of what it is that they're going to try to collect, and then all of a sudden surprises happen. A person you think it was going to be really great is not great in front of the camera, or you know, has a cold and can't show up that day, or you know, God knows what it is. But there's the first con that we will try to cover as much as we possibly can. Then there are other meeting places, but then there is also Lauren, who is a huge fountain of wealth and tremendously articulate and very passionate about what it is that she's saying. And there are people, you know, possibly we will include other actors in it, but mostly we are following the fans and what this has come to mean for them. And like anything, when Roddenberry Gene Roddenberry created the show Star Trek, and sold it as a wagon train to the stars. And just because he was a good sci-fi guy, and he wanted to make it something that was positive, and that he postulates a better future, so he put a black woman in, African American in, for the first time in a show, and a Russian in 1965, which was the height of the Cold War, so that was a real big thing and what have you. Believe me, there was a point in that show when that show began to take off. It was on for 3 years and then it canceled. It was considered a failed show. When that show began to take off, I can assure you that for a while, Gene said, yes, well, you see, they're understanding what it is that I meant and stuff like that. But after a certain point, I know, because he said it to me, I had, I don't know. This is beyond me. This is beyond me. It has a life of its own, with vibes and people of their own. When I talked to Lauren about it, she said, "This is beyond me. This is beyond me. I'm in for the ride. I love it, but it's not really what is intended." So you all have taken this and are now it's beginning to morph, and it's beginning to get bigger and more weighty and more meaningful and more important. And it's that part that I want to try to explore. That's the part that interests me. How something can go from, well, it's a show for, like Lauren said, well, I just wanted to write a show for girls that I could be proud of. And it has been just turned really on its ear. And while it's still doing that, it is now feeding something else. And people are taking it and turning it into something quite wonderful. And I'm hope that we can at least get a glimpse of what that is through this documentary.
And I certainly hope that you can, and I do wish you the best of luck. So you mentioned that the community is what you mostly want to focus on. So you don't, all the rest is just, that was the seed and now you're focusing on the tree, is what you're saying.
Yes, and the tree and the fruits of the tree, the artwork and the music, and the people who say, I'm a trauma ward doctor. I'm a Brony trauma ward doctor. How can I be of help? Or I'm a Brony translator, and I would love to include, when I say this to pretty hardened people, when I say, well, and there's the military, there's some guy in a firefight and he was a Brony, they go, my God, my God. I mean, so the fact of the matter is that this has gone on to mean other things, to mean bigger things. As I said to Lauren, I said, I was trained, I went to Juilliard, I was trained in subtext. I worked on pieces that are about subtext, that nothing really means what you're saying. It's 5 other things and stuff like that. I said, there isn't really very much subtext in My Little Pony. She goes, I know. It's like, what they say is what they mean. I said, this is really interesting. So there's no subcultural thing. And she said, no. And yet, it's the characters. I went, oh, yes, of course, because people kind of sort of identify themselves with the characters. Listen, if you could bottle it, every show in the world would do it. Why does one show create all of this and 2,000 other shows don't? But again, my focus is not on how this could be used to make another show as popular. My focus is on the community that has taken this and turned it into something bigger, more wonderful, more inclusive, more more vibrant, more unexpected than anything that was in Lauren Faust's head, or Hasbro, or anybody else. Everybody is wide-eyed and gaga over this, and you guys are the answer. And maybe we'll be lucky enough to figure it out.
All right. That was all I had. Phoebe?
No, I think that pretty much covers our time.
Is there anything that you want to say to everyone, and there will be people listening to this, that you haven't said before and that you want to say right now? It's open floor.
Well, I would just love to meet everybody. I mean, don't, understand that at the end of a day, sometimes when you have met maybe 1,000 people, you're a little like, my mind will be a sieve. I will be drooling. So if you don't get the reaction that you wanted, I'm sorry. I'm usually better in the mornings than I am after 10 hours of this, but I'm really excited. It sounds like it's going to be a really exciting time. I'm really looking forward to it. I have to personally just concentrate on what I have to do and on the people that are there, and not worry about all the documentary stuff, because that's what Mike and Angie and Laurent's job is to do. But just know that we are 100% committed to doing at least the best job we can. And you know what? Like anything that has a future, and I think that this whole movement has an enormous future. This is just going to be the first one, or maybe it isn't even the first one. I don't even know. I mean, but this will certainly not be the last time. So that there's going to be some footage run on this. So we'll capture some of it, and I'm sure there'll be more for the next guy.
Do you consider yourself a brony?
I think I do, and it's sort of as I'm getting closer to it. At first I could have been like, oh, gee, I don't know what you're talking about, and then I could have gotten a little bit, oh yes, of course. Now as I'm getting further into it, I'm going, back at my age, I think I would have been. Because I had a fair amount of situations in my life that required a certain amount of introspection. I think that being a brony requires introspection. It also requires that things are not working out like super duper, which opens you up to having perhaps another way of thinking. So the answer is yes. And while I can't be much more specific than that, I'm banking on the fact that the world needs more bronies now. That's what we need. We need people who are living and espousing these characteristics and these feelings about how humans interact and work together than what we have had for the last 20, 25 years. So the answer is yes.
I couldn't think of a better note to end on myself. I just want to thank you for your time. It was far over your time limit. I really do appreciate you coming and talking with us. It was
my pleasure. My pleasure, honestly.
A brief reminder to our listeners that the Kickstarter is still going for another 4 days. If it reaches another $52,000, I believe it is, then they will have the funding to attend in Galacon and Bronycon UK, in Manchester and Stuttgart, Germany, respectively, as John was saying earlier. So head on over there. If you've still got a couple spare bucks to spend, go ahead and do it.
Throw all of your money at them, is what we're saying.
Because it can only get better from here.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And You have a wonderful
Thank
day.
you very much. Have a good night.
Okay, and I'm sorry. I just you might have to do a lot of editing now. Okay, talk to you.
All right.
All right, bye
Goodbye.
bye.